Alright, there we go. We're good. So welcome to the Creekside. We're sitting in the dirt.
Creekside Cafe. This is my back support today. This twig is gonna be what helps me fight the sitting against an incline for the next couple hours. It actually doesn't feel bad.
Really?
Yeah, the jagged edge of it is kind of like the soft part.
It's going to be one very specific region of your back that is very well massaged by the end of today.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of as I listen, move it around against my spine.
It's true.
I'm sure I'm gonna need to do. You had some good prompts this week. I didn't understand what the police state of mind was. One was, and that's not what I'm talking about, but you had something about astrology, and you had something right before that too.
Yeah, when it comes to astrology, did we throw the pathos baby out with the logos water?
Yeah, and I had to go and look up exact definitions of ethos and pathos and logos.
Oh yeah.
To even start to understand what you might have been talking about.
I elaborate on this.
But it's the astrology is more of a pathos language.
Yes, exactly.
And there's very little logos going on
Right.
at least on the face of how people talk about
Yes.
it. There's very little logos.
Yes. And I think that the language, when we have the sign... Oh, thank you. Did you fuck it up?
Yeah, it's done.
It's done. Okay, good. The language of science, it focuses on the logos, and we may have thrown out a valuable tool for talking about feelings and shit like that with kind of the conquest of science.
It's a needlessly complexified way to talk about feelings. I think it's needlessly convoluted and made of jargon and stuff when you could just fucking talk about your feelings, man.
But maybe though, the problem with that is that, oh, wait a second. Maybe this is actually already connecting to the other thing. Abstract versus concrete language. I can't remember if that was last week.
We did not get into that one yet.
Well, yeah, this connects back to that because I think that there's a difference between abstract and concrete ways of talking about things, and that ultimately when you're talking about yourself, when you're talking about your experience, ultimately all of your abstract terms are sort of being backed by concrete images. And you can't have an abstract language that has any power unless those abstract words are invoking concrete associations.
Yeah.
And so I guess I bring that up just because I think, if you could imagine we have an abstract language with which to talk about, that we can use, abstract terms that we can use to indicate how I'm feeling. I could say, I'm feeling happy because of this and this and this, or I'm feeling alienated because I have a sense that I don't connect with my community. Okay, so all of those words are almost founded on, and they're being subsidized by a shared culture and mythology about what a community is, and that it can only be really communicated through stories and fiction and images and stuff. And I mean, for myself, I always find myself invoking images from Lord of the Rings and stuff to inform my abstract thoughts about certain things. And that's that's because that's a wealth of feelings.
What's an example of doing that?
When I think of the word grace or something like that.
Okay.
I think I think I could say this is graceful, but unless I have some image in my mind where I go, how did I feel when I was watching Legolas be all graceful? that's what gives the power to that abstract term.
Okay.
And I think like that's what maybe why astrological language is complexified, is it's maybe like necessarily complexified because it has a built-in
So
imagistic
it gives
component.
it imagery, it gives it motion and action, engages your imagination because that's a centaur and that's a fish.
Kind of, yeah.
And that's a ram.
Kind of, yeah.
This one's all about fire, and you know what fire
Exactly.
does.
Exactly. And it's the more complexified associations are like a net that catches people's motivation. It makes them care about things, words, because they're linked to other things. And the logos, the pathos baby, is has been sort of booted out because we have a reductionistic way of talking about things, which, full disclosure, I love the reductionistic way of talking about things. I think reductionism is an amazingly powerful tool.
Yes.
This iPhone is a direct result of reductionism. Not entirely, but it depends upon reductionism.
This example is interesting because it's also a direct result of Steve Jobs taking acid.
Yeah.
Which is a illumination of his inner world and his imagination.
Yeah.
But it could only become concretized by this method of reductionism.
Yeah. It's the interplay, it's the constructionism operating on the raw material that has been left in the wake of reductionistic processes, taking apart everything and leaving the world as it basically as like a bunch of smashed Legos with a bunch of parts laying around that are waiting for someone with inspiration to reassemble them. I think that in the absence of a reductionistic paradigm, inventors would not have the ability to pick up novel things.
Yes.
Because novel things are things that are recently have been expropriated from things that they were used to be a part of. Like, if you imagine like Mark Twain's dream world or whatever, of talking about the way he writes about like pre-modern Europe is like this sleepy. I'm thinking of a particular book, The Mysterious Stranger, where he's talking about this. He's describing an Austrian village in like the 1700s or something, and it's like this world where everything is moving almost as if it's a dream, because the place is so timeless that it's been so long since anything new has happened that people don't almost forget. They can just forget that they're even there.
Yes.
And that's like the opposite end of the spectrum of the kind of like situation of like the environment in which Steve Jobs' idea is able to concretize into something, because he's sitting in there's a bunch of things around him that, everything's destroyed because we live in a culture that is on the bleeding edge and it's very far from equilibrium. It's highly leveraged. So it's like way up on the slope of the local minimum zone. So that creates potential that can be utilized to do things. I guess that's...
Well, veering back to the pathos and the astrology,
Yeah.
I do agree that we lack a language for the inner world. And astrology, in my opinion, is a very ham-handed and stupid way to get back to talking about our inner worlds and our subjective experiences. I think Carl Jung did an amazing job trying to illuminate that world, what's going on in there. I was having a conversation yesterday with someone gazing at the enormous insanity of the war on drugs and wondering how on earth such a thing could come to be, because we were both on Molly and experiencing a very non-obtrusive, benevolent chemical that was just good.
Yeah.
Just the definition of Molly is just like some goodness for your sensory mechanism. And we're in a world where that's a Schedule 1 drug. It's like the most illegal, most dangerous fucking substance ever. Stay away. Stay away. And I think it's being taught culturally, especially in the generations preceding ours, that the inside, the unconscious, is only this repository of animal instincts and Freudian gross impulses and like dark things, and like if it wasn't for our civilized outward looking age, we'd all be fucking savages, Lord of the Flies, and just run around raping and killing and stealing, and that's inside everyone. And so I think that was taken for granted in like boomer generations and before. And so that creates an entire population of people who have no idea what's motivating them from inside. And they do know that these drugs and the whole blanket associations of weed and psychedelics and everything that gets shoved in with them, like Molly, is like obviously openings to your subconscious and your unconscious. And to the extent that you as a citizen have not interfaced with that at all, to that extent are you afraid and don't trust yourself and your inner world. To that extent do you project on anyone doing illicit substances that could open up the unconscious these overblown archetypes of like massive destabilizers of civilization that's going to erode all the values of everything if we let that happen. So I think that's how you got a public sponsorship of this war on drugs, because everyone was basically afraid of their inner lives and would gladly keep other people from exploring their own inner lives.
So you're suggesting that
And astrology is a ham-handed attempt to start developing a new language with each other about what's happening inside.
Yeah.
Because we don't have those tools.
Yeah. It's kind of like a great tragedy that we only think that there's bad things lurking in our unconscious, and that we've forgotten that maybe there's like gems down there too.
Yes.
Like, and not just like, you know, abstract things like goodness or whatever, but like really specific artifacts of like consciousness, like particular kinds of inspiration, like visions, artistic visions and visions about what interpersonal relationships could be, and how, and like feelings toward other people and stuff. I wonder, that's a good question, like when you're on, what exactly is happening when you take Molly? Is it, and I'm thinking, I've never taken Molly myself, so I don't, this is a kind of an abstract, this is kind of a hypothetical exploration, but is it something like your brain is like, you're able to like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, are the feelings that you have for people under the influence, are they a fiction more so than the fiction that you normally experience them as, or is it really that you're digging in, like you're uncovering, is it the removal of a kind of filtering reduction valve mechanism toward your emotions? At least with psychedelics, I think that when you look at something like a tree when you're on mushrooms, you're not really seeing anything different. You're not seeing anything that wasn't there before. You're seeing things that were always there that you just were sort of blind to. You're taking in a much more powerful image of what something is. And the way that you look at another person, I think, you have a special vision when you look at a human being compared to anything else. because you perceive
yes.
that as a human, you see another dimension. You see the soul, and you see the person there, and like it's, you know, behind the eyes, or whatever metaphor you, wherever you focus that on. Humans like a portal into another inner realm, and you're looking at the surface of it, and maybe when it comes to mushrooms, the kind of perceptive filters that are being removed are something that has to do with your normal tendency to filter out information that isn't good for your survival, or what that isn't, like, evolution hasn't told your brain to look at that specifically, so you don't see it under normal circumstances. But then on mushrooms, you understand that there's a much more rich world than you're aware of. And I think maybe something analogous is happening with Molly, is that it's a kind of like expansion of your emotional vision, where you're able to like get into that portal more, or something like that. And you're kind of, I just think that's interesting, and that the language associations that we have are like almost like hooks that we're using to try to grapple into that realm and pull ourselves into some sort of like zone where it doesn't seem impossible to like experience someone else's inner world. Because I think the abstract way of talking about things is a really, really impoverished language set of words that you probably need like some kind of enrichment of those associations to be able to have language act that way.
Do you, on the whole, feel like you are able to communicate with the people around you, the people closest to you?
Sometimes.
Like, do you feel in general that you have an understanding of the person that you're with?
Not as much as I could.
And what's motivating them?
Not as much as I could. I think that, I feel like I could have I feel like there are some people in the world who seem to have a immediate ability to perceive what it is another person is made of. I think I could do that, but I have sort of a kind of like
certainly not very interesting to you and like relevant to your career path, what the insides of people are doing.
I wouldn't say that. I think it's very interesting to me. It's just that I think most people keep themselves. You have kind of an interface to the world, where you have your inner world, and then you have the mode of expression that is used as a signal to communicate to other people what your inner world is, and that can be like the way you dress, or the words you use, or like just and like that's, so it's like an abstraction layer that's built on top of your raw emotional layer, and people's abstraction layers bump into each other, and they negotiate, and then whatever gets figured out there is what flows back into people's inner worlds. And what I would like to be able to do is dispense with the abstraction layer. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I wish I had telepathy. I wish I could achieve telepathic communication. And I feel like with one particular person in my life, that is possible under certain circumstances, where I can have.
Well, I think it's very possible in all circumstances, personally. And I think telepathy is the base phenomena of what's happening between people. And I think the basic telepathy that's already happening is what sponsors language. Like, the only reason language works to any extent that it does is because we're also communicating telepathically. I think everyone's walking around with their hearts on their sleeves. Like, I mostly see, when I actually see a person, like, I see a naked person, essentially. with their insides on their outsides. No one's really hidden, I don't think. And it's really a matter of how much I'm censoring my own real, raw, first immediate impressions of people or not. Because it's all like there. And how they walk and how they look at you and how long they look at you and what they're wearing and how they're doing what they're doing. Like, what's the action of why they're in this moment right now, and what are they doing, and where are they going with it, and in what way, what's their sense of life, to use a phrase of Ayn Rand's. Like, people are emoting their sense of life to you, and you can get a bunch of immediate core tenets that they believe in based on what their sense of life is.
Sense of life, that's kind of a cool phrase. Yeah, that's kind of like people's energy that they're putting off.
Like, there was a lot of impressions to get off that middle-aged lady we came into Upper Crust with.
Yeah.
She was super cheerful.
Yeah.
And open and like happy to be there.
Yeah.
Happy to be talking, or like having to navigate a door, or like who's entering the door first.
Yeah.
Fucking
yeah.
thing with us.
Right.
Just a quiet, pleased aura. And that's like the base like most low res version of her. Like,
Yeah.
we don't know anything about her.
I found myself telling a story, a little like proto story about her as I was interacting with her. Like, I was not like specifics, but now that you like described that, I'm thinking back, I was totally imagining her emotional state during that time. Like, I was kind of thinking like maybe she's happy to be out now, because I remember specifically wondering if this was new for her to come out of the Corona quarantine time. And like I could see, I don't know, it's kind of hard to disentangle those things. It's really easy to misinterpret what someone's giving off, but maybe the misinterpretation comes from trying to reconcile those impressions with language, and you just fool yourself if you don't try to put things into words. Maybe you have maybe you just have immediate access to truth, you know? I think it's something like mosquito. Watch Mosquito Never Lands.
What was the prompt before the astrology one on the list?
It was kind of related to that. There's obviously structure below us. Would it be so surprising if there were structure above us? Was that the one you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very hippie thought.
It's a very hippie thought. That sort of tied into this idea of, well, you know.
We'd have to lay out terms of what below us means, what above us means.
Oh, well, for me, it's really simple. Below us, I'm thinking below us and above us, not in a spatial dimension, but in the dimension of like a stack. And I have to describe what I mean by a stack. A stack is a term that comes from software. Got it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, a stack is like a set of you have a simple set of programs that provide the foundation for another set of another program which talks to those programs, and then you have another program which rests on top of that program. So, like in the internet, you have some low-level software that is just responsible for controlling the way that bits go through the cables under the ocean. It doesn't know anything about the content of those bits. It's just going 0 or 1.
Yeah.
So it's and it's multiplexing the signals across the fiber optic cable, so that it's like the transport layer, and
that is
that's a layer of the stack.
That's a lower layer.
It's a lower layer, yes. And the reason it's lower is because other layers are built on top of that are an abstraction of what's going on there. So that layer takes care of translating the physical medium, like whether it's photons or electrons or whatever, it creates an abstraction of them as bits. And then you have another layer which creates an abstraction of those bits into like something like packets. And then that creates like a networking layer that routes the packets where they need to go. And then on top of that, you have like, a few more layers. Ultimately, you have an application layer that's creating high-level abstract associations of what do these bits mean. So it might be like a photo. That photo gets plugged into an application. So you have these progressive levels of abstraction that are using the layer below them as the raw material to accomplish something higher level. And so if you think about the world as like a stack of structures, of nested structures,
yes,
we're at one particular slice. Our perspective manifests itself at a particular slice, a particular level in that stack. And we can see, like with science, you can do experiments to figure out the nature of the levels below you because you have the ability to take things apart. Like, you can see how a human being is composed of organs, and then you can see how the organs are composed of tissues, and tissue composed
of... And like, what's one stack above from us? Just one above us.
Politics.
Okay.
So, or like society is one level of abstraction, and society has its own dynamics that are also governed by like physical. It's like a physical process.
See, there's an immediate like the degradation of conscious will, even one stack above us, and the implication of the question, it's also asking, at further stacks up, is there more free will happening? Is there volition happening?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
That's implied in the question.
Yes.
But we project from here degradations of free will the farther out from our slice stack we get.
Yes.
So even just one stack up into politics and society, it's less conscious and more reflexive. And so to the extent that goes unexamined, the scientist sees further and further vertical stacks as less and less and less conscious and more automatic and arbitrary.
I would say they see them as even less real. And there is a certain justification for seeing it that way. But I think that is often you're missing something there. Because when it comes to levels below us, you can use science to figure out those levels, because the levels below, like where we are, is sort of depends upon the way things below us are. Like nothing in chemistry would be the same if the tiniest aspect of atomic physics changed. Sure. That would rewrite the whole reality if you change something down. And that's why it doesn't get rewritten. And so there's a kind of stability there, which allows you to come up with really specific experiments to figure out. And so our vision, because we use the scientific process as the sense-making system, organ of our civilization, we have this high-res vision of the layers below us, even down to like the atomic layer. Like, we know the mass of a proton to like the 11th decimal place. That is an astounding piece of information that we've managed to claw out of the nature.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and that's many, many, many layers below us, and we figured out things that are going on in the quantum realm. But when it comes to things like just one layer above us in the other direction, it seems our vision does not extend in that direction. Because, think about like, there's no such thing as consensus about the physics of various economic doctrines. There is an incredible amount of disagreement, politicization, exceptions, contention because, in a sense, the physics of those economic doctrines are kind of...
But the truth of those phenomena is still there, regardless of our discovery of it or not.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting that might not be the case, actually. I'm suggesting that the layers above us are in some sense provisional, because instead of us depending on them, like they depend on us. Like we depend on physics and chemistry working the way they do for us to even exist and even ask that question. But the way our society is structured depends on what we want. And you could imagine that there's multiple possible configurations of a society that would kind of all be sitting in their own local minimum.
But that's not a true up the stack from us politics and society. If it depends on us, then that's still a stack under us. It changes based on our actions.
I don't think so. I think it's the distinction is that we are essentially a subunit of it, instead of it being a subunit of us. Like,
but it depends on us.
It's influenced by us, yeah. It depends. It doesn't. It's like we sort of have a relationship to it where the definition of a society is that it's composed of people. I think the depending on is not really what I'm getting at. It's like, it's more of a composition. Like, we're composed of cells, but a society is composed of us. So it's like...
I guess where I'm more comfortable in saying that there is a truth and an objectivity to how higher layers of the stack function, like 2 stacks up,
Sure.
3 stacks up. Like the greater order to things.
Yes.
The greater order to how the planets
Yeah.
work with each other. The greater order to how planets get swirled into existence.
Yes.
The greater order to how multiple dimensions are able to coexist.
Yeah. No, and that's kind of what I was getting at when I think that when it comes to that, we don't know how many layers of the stack are above us. And if there, there's been a lot of time in the universe for this stack to build itself.
Sure.
And
even just in our terms.
In our space-time, exactly. And when we're doing something like trying to build a language, for instance, we're creating a reality that exists, but if we all, like, the more things that depend on that language, the more things we put on top of something, the more real it is. Like, the reality of something is a function of what's resting on it. Because if you were to imagine, like, let's say in the very beginning time, Big Bang, nothing but, and we're excluding multiverse considerations here, but let's imagine it's just a simple volume. You just have a bunch of atoms. Those atoms are like a bunch of, like, subatomic particles. They haven't even formed atoms yet. Little permutations cause some little thing to happen, which is a reinforcing process, which starts kind of like creating a kind of historical dependence in the process of development of the universe. And if things just like 1 second after that first little atomic configuration happened, it's in some sense is less real, because if something, it could change. Another fluctuation could happen which could change the game, and then history would depend on that one. So I mean, like, it's like how a blockchain, like, a block is more real the more blocks are after it. Because basically the more history you have to rewrite to change something, I think that's like what a definition of what real is.
So, like, the chemical composition of steel and the way to make steel is more real than an iPhone.
Yeah, exactly.
At this point.
Exactly.
And the way to make silicone chips is more real.
Exactly.
Than an iPhone.
However, in the future, if you imagine, like, human civilization we survive we don't destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons. We don't our species survives, and we just get increasingly powerful computer technology to the point where we're able to create computers that simulate whole universes, and those universes themselves start creating things. And at that point, the design of a silicon chip that was made by us is fully within the laws of physics, because it's baked into a relative. It has a lot of stuff is sitting on top of it. So from the perspective of all those things that depend on all those simulated worlds that depend on our silicon chip.
See, I'm not so sure about that, because people in typewriter age might have said the same thing about typewriters. That it's just gonna go from here and build and build and build, and at the bottom of it all is the typewriter.
But they were right. We're still using the same key pattern as typewriters.
Okay, but the actual typewriter, we don't.
No, but
the technology of how a typewriter is put together.
Sure,
It's
but
gone.
but some
So it's
little
still
bit of its DNA
a-
is still in the world.
A silicone chip, like I can see a similar thing happening there, like letting go
Right.
of the use of the silicone chips is as soon as we find like a water-based chip medium, and then that takes the place of silicone chips at the base of that block of reality, that blockchain.
Right. But as long as the typewriter was a necessary step to develop a more advanced system, it's still in a causation way kind of the
Sure.
same part of it. Like the word QWERTY, like keyboard, QUER.
QW.
It's nice that arbitrary key positions follow the rules of English, that U comes after. Wait. Oh wait, no.
You're tripping.
I'm tripping, man. How do you spell QWERTY? QWERT, right? Okay. Right?
ERTY.
Thank you.
Yes.
And then a bunch of other letters like UIOP, you want to say?
Yeah.
Nice. So the reason why those letters are in that position is because all of the letters to spell the word typewriter are in the top row.
Okay.
That's by design. Because the very first typewriters that were made, no one knew how to type. No one could type quickly. And so there was a large amount of skepticism from potential customers
Right.
of the company who was selling these typewriters that, like, what is this newfangled machine? Like, I'm going to have to hunt around and, like, peck for, find, like, the key. Like, people had this expectation that they were going to be able to type, like, one word per minute or something.
Yeah.
And that was probably true at the beginning. So what they did is that the sales representatives who were in a showroom trying to sell these typewriters, they're like, look, we put all the words for the word typewriter in the top row. So when a customer comes,
Right.
just go like this. Go, look, I'm going to type a word, typewriter, typewriter. And then you could just memorize it without having to learn how to type. And then
Right,
that would
yeah.
convince the customer that, oh, it is possible to write fast. And
Sure.
because of that particular sales gimmick, that key pattern is baked into keyboard.
Yeah.
And in the year 2900, assuming we don't have just a complete neural interface, if any keyboards are still in use, I fucking promise you they're still going to have that same pattern.
I don't know about that.
Really.
I don't know about that. If an objectively better way comes along with an effective transmission method of convincing people that it's better, then it'll take the place of that.
Well, they tried. There's a Dvorak keyboard, which is like a different arrangement of keys that is optimized for all words, not just the word typewriter.
Right, yeah.
And it's been around for a long time, and it has gone nowhere.
Yeah.
Because how are you going to retrain an entire population? You're not going to be able to. If you had a paradigm shift and you had a completely different mode of communication, like, if you could just think words onto a page, then I could totally see that being a thing that overtakes. But it seems like the only way to change things the only way to get around these deeply embedded patterns is to create new dimensions, like orthogonal modes of things.
Sure.
Like, do we really believe that, for instance, our political dysfunction is going to be fixed from the inside by following the exact rules and trying to change things according to the mechanisms of the system? Most likely not. Most likely it's going to require the new growth of a new, healthy, self-sustaining benefit, thing that kind of just slowly picks up slack from failing systems. And that's an orthogonal way of doing things.
So what do you think is the deepest thought, or like the most profound truth we've had in our 46 podcasts so far? I have like a specific set of thoughts that we hit in mind in the Hooker Oak area. Do you know which area I'm talking about? Like with the baseball diamond?
Yes, the leaf blower area.
Yeah, and we got to like the meaning of life and like seeing things and changing things and like the action of changing the code. And being inside a code that kind of you're making yourself. And as soon as I'm trying to like get back there and articulate it, it's like very swiftly slipping out of my hands like grains of sand. But I know the day at least that I have is the answer.
That's significant, yeah.
If not the actual thoughts we landed on that day.
Well, maybe just leave that for a second, because I think what I'm going to say kind of connects to that. I think for me, one of the most profound things was actually relating to, it's kind of a meta idea, but I think it's the idea that art and engineering are really two aspects of the process of creation. And that I think that we kind of came upon this idea when we were looking at the trees in Lower Park one time. And it was like this idea that there's a kind of artistry to the way that systems evolve to create potential for more life. And I think that the reason why that felt so significant was because it was a direct reflection of the thing that brought us together and is this whole thing is premised on, is that there's a kind of a personal aspect to it where I feel like we're talking about the same thing that actually synthesized this perspective to be able to talk about that. So that felt like it really...
I don't know what the fuck that sentence was that you just said.
The thing we're talking about, this unity of an artistic and an engineering approach, is the thing that synthesized this podcast where we talked about that thing.
In what way did it do that?
Well, because we're talking about it all. We're discussing things at all. We're talking about things from the perspective of we're finding unity in trying to sort of connect the sort of like the mechanistic with the imagistic, to put it in a particular way.
I'm latching onto the tree thing, because that was one of our earliest strains of thought. In first months of quarantine, where I was zeroing in on the more optimistic impulse I'd had that week, which was based on what the trees do, and that plants just grow forward through hardship and around hardship, and suffering has an embedded code meant to show you how to stop the suffering, and a general optimistic impulse in the midst of that micro Armageddon, that things are working themselves out, and that you can find yourself here or back there in quarantine and see, okay, what is this showing me about the weakness of my code? And like an internal logic that the same way a plant reaches for the sun, a man reaches for success and can sense it and knows where to go to get it. And it's as physically natural to a man to be successful as a tree reaching for the sun.
I want to go on a little tangent here because I don't want to forget this before I say it, because
Take it.
Okay.
Go.
that's what I love about this podcast. And you particularly, that you are one of those people who's capable of circling back. You're a master at that, I think.
Oh, thank you.
More so than anyone I've talked to, maintaining a stitchedness, a wovenness. Okay, whatever. That's a tangent on a tangent. The tangent I'm going to go on. See, I'm
Here we
demonstrating my own inability to do that. Which is probably why I recognize that in you, because it's something my mind's like a branching tree
Okay,
that never
well,
gets back. Okay, so
Pick that fucking branch.
fuck, I gotta grab onto this branch right now. So, when you said, as a man reaches, like making that comparison, you specifically use the word man. And right now, I can hear...
Did Bridget pop into your head?
No. No.
Go ahead,
I think,
sorry.
for the record, I think Bridget brings an amazing perspective. In case you're watching this, thank you. I'm thanking you directly. I don't know if you're ever going to watch this, but if you are,
She will.
okay, cool.
She will.
It's that perspective. I think that
As soon as I said man, you thought.
yes. As soon as I said man, or as soon as you said man, I thought I can hear a chorus of people in the back, or some potential viewers going, man, why didn't you say person? And I think that gets into this thing where I wonder, aren't we doing ourselves a disservice as a culture, or as like a, by insisting upon forcing everyone to use gender neutral language? Because it's like we don't trust ourselves we don't trust people to have a kind of charity about things where we know what they mean when they say something. And that, like, I am a man. I am speaking from the perspective of a man. Mm-hmm. If I were not to speak from the perspective, like, I can pretend to not speak from the perspective of a man.
But I'd still be.
I'd still
be predicting a man.
Exactly.
Into any fucking hypothetical situation.
You'd be a man speaking from the perspective of a man pretending not to.
Yeah.
So why can we not dispense with the pretending and just give each other the benefit of the doubt, going, I know that I'm not excluding anyone when I say this. I don't need to modify my language. And it gets down, and I can see both sides of this, because I can see how people say, well, language is powerful. The words you use influence reality. And I will say that's true. And one of the ways that words, and using a pointed, and insisting upon neutrality, is also influencing reality. And what it's doing is it's reinforcing the reality that you don't trust other people.
That's true.
And
Very well put.
and that's another aspect, and that's
It's seeing the stacks under it, above it, that, like, the intention of the speech. The intention of the words is what's casting the spell.
Yeah, we're giving
more than the words themselves.
We're taking some of our own power and we're giving it away to the abstract language that we use, and we're removing that power from our own
It tasted good.
interpersonal thing. So, like, I think that it's a kind of, we're like blinking in the face of this. We're not trusting other people. We're like, we're going, none of us can trust each other, so we have to create this neutral, abstract ground where where all of our communication takes place, but that it depersonalizes the communication. And I think that maybe it's entirely possible that the net results of doing that is just furthering the alienation we have of each other.
It does.
Yeah, and that's just a perspective. Anyways, that was my tangent, but
well, it goes into the telepathy that sponsors
Yeah.
all conversation. And how does that telepathy show up in conversation? It shows up in the phenomenon of granting good faith assumption to the person in front of you.
yeah,
As a way of even fucking talking to them, you automatically grant this is a good faith actor. That's a requirement of an actual conversation, as opposed to an argument for ego power,
yeah,
which is not a conversation. That's a level of violence almost, and like pointless wrestling to
Yeah.
a zero sum.
yeah,
When you see someone with your eyes and you see their facial cues and you see their body language, you're getting all these telepathic messages, and to listen to them, there's a brain phenomena going on. To even understand the words, you're recreating the words in your own mind with your own voice to yourself. The same way the eye, the brain has to create the visual image before you can see it. It has to be completely reconstructed inside your brain before you see a visual impression. And that's how you listen to people too, is this empathy-based
yeah.
thing of empathizing with
Yeah.
them and putting yourself in their shoes in the form of unconsciously the words they're saying into your ears, you're like saying them to yourself in your own voice. And that results in a phenomena of you grant someone good faith if you're talking to them in person, and you take it for granted that they're saying what they mean, and
Yeah.
that they are going to be respectful to you and polite to you, and you're
Yeah.
going to be respectful and polite to them.
Yes.
And that's a natural biological, I bet it's biological to do that when you talk to someone else. And that is the way to communicate with people. Twitter is not the way to communicate with people. So changing language to account for the limitations of Twitter is
Such a loss.
is putting
Yeah.
investment of human connection itself onto a app that has the lowest bandwidth fucking ever and isn't fit to hold human connection.
Yeah.
But SJWs are trying to change language itself to better be on Twitter. And that's just not the way human connection happens, period. Human connection happens face to face, physically with people. And that's mainly the only way that's necessary to talk to strangers.
Wow. Yeah, I wonder if in the future people.
Yes, this means an outlawing of certain dissociations of language. Like if you're a certain distance from each other in terms of language and like creed, like it will be socially unacceptable to do it in any form except face to face.
Yeah.
Or like if they're too far from you, to connect with them requires FaceTime.
Yeah.
Like you're not allowed to text only communicate with someone in a different country.
Yeah.
You have to FaceTime them,
Yeah.
because it might become understood over time, the wisdom of the species understood that you literally can't. It's not a shouldn't at that point. It's you literally can't communicate to the like higher standards of communication we've decided are well, I'm only gonna communicate the real way because it's fucking dumb how our grandparents communicated, like nothing even happened. We understand now that the real way is face to face.
Yeah, like in the future, like in the year 2100, there'll be like it'll be the general understanding that like among media historians or whatever, that like in the early part of the 21st century, public dialogue evolved in a way to, and we created all these new linguistic ticks almost to accommodate the limited, the nature of the, like, because that was back, in the early 21st century. A lot of public communication happened on a platform that was called Twitter, and on this platform, humans communicated to each other through tiny little bits of text. And now, in hindsight, we see how that influenced the development of language to try to create this liability-reducing, miscommunication-reducing signals, and that influenced language. And so that's like the medium itself had this perverse influence on language.
Yes.
Where at the time,
and
a lot
the world nearly got destroyed.
And the world nearly fucking ended. Yeah, because we started to try to do politics in 240 characters.
Yes.
And when we did that, we realized disaster was nearly averted. The human race was only saved by the development of the in-person chat technology, where you put a little device on, and it creates this simulation where you could talk to someone, where you can see every micro expression.
You can see their body.
The tone of their voice. Yeah, and there was this technology finally went through this low point where before the internet, things were face to face, and there was this tradition, there was this culture.
Oh, there's so many layers of verification that get built in automatically there. Like, if you couldn't make a tweet unless you put on the helmet field that recorded your whole body, you could only enunciate things with your body, and you could only take in someone's tweet by looking at their whole body, visually saying the word into the camera. And it's some foolproof technology that can't be gamed and like faked. And so like the bullshit detector is like way hella times more accurate, because they can't just type out what they want to say. They have to say it out loud and have their whole body be seen while they say it.
Can you imagine? Okay, I think a good way, this is a thought experiment. Okay, imagine a couple who are in some argument. There's some emotional trauma that happened between them. They're both feeling hurt. They're both in pain. They have some issue, right? And the only way, but imagine now that they are, instead of sitting down and having a face-to-face communication, maybe sitting together, touching each other, holding each other, and talking in a quiet voice, close to each other. Instead of doing that, they're sitting in separate rooms, texting each other. Is that going to is the text, see, which one of those things is more likely to produce an outcome where at the end they go, oh, I understand what you're saying. Oh, I understand what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Versus this just violent, horrible, terrible, there's a typing indicator going, and there's a typing indicator, and then there's like, wait, which one am I responding to? And it's just this angry torrent of disconnected. Wait, what did and then it just, there's no emotion in it, and it's just like this terrible, terrible thing where you feel like the more you talk, the further you're getting divided apart. That's what's going on a massive scale right now. We're having the Democrats and Republicans are having an angry text fight with each other.
Yeah. That's
what's going on, is we have, the Trump supporters and the SJWs are like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. And it's just like this, but instead of, it's not even a...
But you know exactly what I mean. When people are face to face, even like if they would literally shout at each other on Twitter, according to their ideologies, being with each other in the same room face to face automatically makes them be respectful.
Yeah, and a little nicer to each other.
Okay, I'm not gonna trip this person. I'm not gonna insult this person in front of everybody.
Right.
I'm not gonna punch them. They're a person. They're in front of me. I'm going to be baseline respectful because it's a person.
Yes.
And that's like, imagine if the equivalent of that was included in the language of their tweets.
Oh my God, this is so important.
I have I have a tangent to
Okay,
break
yeah.
fork off that.
You have the lighter?
I'm sorry, I don't know where the lighter is.
Oh shit.
I'll stand up.
Maybe I have it. Fuck. Oh shit, I have it.
Oh
I'm sorry.
my God.
I'm sorry.
Okay, because this was one of my prompts I wanted to do, but it's of kind of the opposite import, because I'm thinking about the experience of texting my lady, and like a huge amount of our relationship over like the last like 5 years has developed on the side of our experience that's just texting each other on the cell phone.
Yeah.
Like, hanging out physically is like a totally different thing. And then like our texting avatars get together after the hangout and like restate everything in their little text language.
Yeah.
And the prompt I had regarding this was about the endorphin releases that apps are programmed to trigger in you with all their sounds and the haptic feedback of touching keys on your phone. It's all meant to like give you hormone releases, and in service of that, we have pleasing notification chimes. We have ways to thumbs up what people are saying, and it's getting more and more subtle and more immediate. From the app's perspective, they're just operating on a base admonition to increase the seconds of screen time the person spends on your app and not someone else's app. So in service of that, they're introducing more and more subtlety to the back and forth texting. Like, the first thing was the scene screen, where you know when they have seen your text.
Yes.
Because it doesn't say
Yeah.
seen and just says the timestamp until they see it, and then it says seen.
Yeah.
And
That carries information.
and that's like an immediate, and it's more of an endorphin thing to keep you more hooked on that app, because it's more live feedback about what's going on. And then from there, they put reacts. So now you can put a thumbs up or a heart on any individual text. Instead of responding to it, you can just do a react to it. And then they blew up the reacts to like 5 or 6 different kinds of reacts instead of just a heart or just a thumbs up. And so that's another level of like another subtlety of responding to someone that we now have available to us. Like, now there's 3 different levels of communication, and only one of them is actually typing something to your friend. There's the other level of communication, which is seeing it, and just seeing it and doing nothing else with the text is a communication to the person. Then there's another way to communicate how we're doing, which is the reacts. And then there's a third way of communicating what you're thinking and doing, which is actually saying things. And then the most recent thing, obviously, is the typing icon. You can see physically when they're typing now. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm experiencing this developing, like, app addiction protocol in, like, the years of texting my lady. It's more and more, like, subtle, immediate feedback, like, of a back and forth, and more of the back and forth is being visually and auditorily expressed in the cell phone. And it's this new kind of connecting with people that we've never had before, that has the potential to deepen and broaden the scope of increase the bandwidth more than what we could have done face to face. It has that potential.
And I was actually just thinking when you were describing those three things, I was thinking there's actually a fourth too that I can think, which is modulation of the timing of response in the asynchronous text communication.
Yeah.
Like, for instance...
Yeah, like an immediate text of mine can let it be a super neutral, bland, dumb text, but I'm telling you by the immediacy that I care.
Yeah, or the opposite of that
Or
is
the
that
opposite,
when someone texts and you go like, so, and you say something that you're kind of really... You're kind of curious to what they say. Maybe it's kind of a sensitive thing, and then if you don't get a response for a long time, the longer they've seen it, you go, fuck. Fuck. Okay, and then there's this building pressure. Yes. Okay, maybe I should clarify. Are they angry? Who knows? And so your imagination is like, okay, either you're imagining they saw that, now they're angry, and they're not texting back, or maybe they're just thinking about it. Because it's entirely possible that they could be going, oh, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I'm going to think about this for a second before I respond. But the other person's imagining, oh, they're mad.
And then there's a new language that develops to account for that. Like, I'm thinking of when I text Nick. And sometimes, because him and I have learned that we miscommunicate constantly in a really, like, fucking drastic way, that, like, I'm remembering literal times when one or the other of us is just going, I'm thinking about that. Yeah. Like, stops their side of just giving a scene screen and comes out of it and goes, oh, I'm just giving them a scene screen for this big thing. Like, I'm just thinking about that.
Wait, what's a scene screen exactly?
When it says scene.
Oh, scene. S-E-E-N.
Yeah.
I was imagining S-C-E-N-E. What's a scene screen? Scene indicator. Okay, gotcha. All right. Makes sense. Yeah, I know. It's, so like, these, you can see how there's this deep necessity for an elaboration of the context of speech. That is, desperately, text apps are trying to do that, but there's limitations on the medium.
So the way it is a higher bandwidth thing to have face-to-face, but also have recourse to texting.
Yeah.
It's the same way as what writing a letter does. Like, if you can think clearer in those terms, then there's things you can't tell the other person with the clarity you want to, and with the honesty you want to, talking out loud to them. Because there's that aspect of opening your mouth and not knowing what the fuck you're about to say.
I love that.
And it's all the spontaneity of the passing moment is informing it.
Yeah.
But with the written word, you get to see it before you put it out to them. And so that's a way it's not a replacement. I think we established very clearly just now that this tech shit cannot be a replacement for communication.
Yes.
It has to be built on core tenets of face-to-face connection.
Yes.
But it increases the potential of that basis by including the written word, and you get to be more intentional and more exact. There's an opportunity, at least, to be more intentional and more exact.
It's kind of it's a double-edged sword, I think, because when you have the ability to be fully intentional and you have the ability to revise and edit what it is you just wrote before you click send, you have the opportunity to reflect before you say, and that can be a good thing. But it can also limit the truth sometimes of what you're saying, because a lot of times the things you say when you open your mouth and you're not sure what you're going to say and then just say it are sometimes very honest.
Sure.
And sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they're not what you really think. But there has to be a kind of, in the face-to-face world, that ability to say something you don't really mean immediately is backed up and is sort of like tempered by the ability for the other person to perceive using face-to-face aspects of conversation to sort of like inform the way that they take what you just said. Like if you, for example, had like an angry outburst and you said, well, you know what, blah, blah, whatever. That person might hear the literal words of what you're saying, but then they're also going to they're going to hear the tone with which you said it and the speed and the immediacy with which you said it. And
but see, there's a reflexiveness to that, and this is where text can be a better way to interface more complex, more triggering issues interpersonally, because you can get the full blow of an angry outburst, and the medium itself is saying it'll still be there when you're ready to deal with it rationally. In a conversation, it has to be dealt with right here, because the words aren't recorded anywhere, not even in your memory, really. Are you going to remember exactly what they said 30 seconds after they said it?
Yeah.
But a text is saying, like, it's there for when you're ready to deal with it. So if it's challenging, you can set it aside and not deal with it until you're ready to. And it'll still be there in the exact words they use.
Yeah. If you're gonna deal with things in a synchronous way, you have to trust the person you're talking to, because
all these things of like, it's higher bandwidth to incorporate this. Like, I'm taking for granted assumptions that, okay, well, you have to be committed to honesty.
Yeah. Yes, you do.
And you have to be committed to expression.
And you have to believe that the other person is committed to honesty and expression.
Yes.
That is the thing that subsidizes the conversation you're having. That puts the guardrails on. Like, if you're talking to a friend, if one of my good friends came up to me and was like, you know what, fuck you, man, my first reaction would be to sort of go like, what are you saying? Like,
go on.
Yeah,
That's what I would do.
I would be like, I wouldn't immediately be like, fuck you. You know what I'm saying? I would be like curious, like, I would be really curious, like, what? Tell me more. What? Why? What? Because I would suspect that, like, oh, are you joking, or are you, or is there like what? I would be like really open to seeing what are you trying to say? Whereas if it was like like on Twitter, if I posted something that was like maybe even mildly controversial or not even controversial at all, and anonymous person was like, fuck you, I'd be like, oh, all right, fuck them. Respond, fuck you. Okay, whatever. Next. So, because there's no investment, there's nothing that you can just brush that off, and that's a kind of like, that right there shows you how little ability those low bandwidth ways have to actually make any progress in terms of bringing people together. They're really good at creating like a one-to-many conversational pattern where I just say one thing that is not directed to any one person. It's not directed to anyone at all. It's actually just, it's a projection of my thought so that other people, the onus is entirely on them to interpret it how they are going to, and there's nothing I can do to change how they're going to interpret things.
This tasted so good that I'm just gonna put it out right now. I just want to like savor it.
Nice. That's good.
Like, I let the hit up into my nasal passages sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like this heat bath like up through my sinuses.
Nice.
And
nice.
but it's like I'm tasting it as it goes up there.
Absolutely. That's delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're tasting the sweet essence of. Right.
I want to jump to the prompt about meta thoughts and long-term thoughts.
Go for it.
I guess I just have to introduce it.
Yeah.
These long-term projects of thoughts, like not just dealing with topics in this moment and then that podcast is finished and we go on to the next podcast with new topics, but big things that we build over many podcasts.
Yeah.
And so this is a more like philosophy kind of bent this activity we're doing. So real questions of metaphysics and real questions of philosophy that are like Icarus reaching for the sun as high as we can, taking it for granted that it's too big to answer in one podcast. But it's a long-term project of letting our understanding tackle it repeatedly over the course of a year.
Yeah, that's really, I feel like...
And then we start to track our progress in bigger terms of objectivity. Like, we'll get to see what we did in 2020. We get to see what we accomplished in 2021. Like, oh, that's when we became sure of blank.
Yeah.
And that's when we like finally created the first answer to the question of like blank.
I guess where I have to start with this is just try to figure out what is really the frontier of my understanding about things. What are the things that I'm...
Where does your certainty start to break down?
Yeah. What is the... And like, I mean, there's plenty of regions where my certainty breaks down that I don't care about. Like, I don't know much
of course.
There's many topics that I just I've never pursued, and they're not something I'm actively thinking about. I'm trying to figure out what do I kind of like hope to, what direction do I hope to progress in my understanding towards things.
Yeah, so I guess like what issue would be maximally relevant and beneficial for you to be certain of?
For some reason, like purpose is coming up.
Your purpose?
Yeah. What do I want in life?
I remember that was a question we were finding an answer to on that Hook or Oak podcast. That was like when I was thinking of the deepest thoughts we've achieved so far. It was us finding a couple new answers to purpose and what our purpose as free will beings was.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a sandbox kind of an answer. Like, well, we're in a sandbox to create answers. And my end of the stick was, if we come into a meaningless world, the meaning of existence is in the fact that we get to change that meaningless world if we find it unsatisfying. Oh, there's no meaning here. So that means it's my opportunity to create meaning.
Yeah, and I think this also is related to this idea that I go back and forth about, and I think this is actually perfect because this is something that I do wonder about a lot, is this idea of destiny.
This is something you'd like to be certain of?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to get clearer on this relationship between destiny and free will. To what extent is our purpose...
And so you're kind of associating purpose with destiny.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out... I'm trying to get a stronger metaphysical... I don't know the answer to this. I'm trying to get a stronger metaphysical certainty on to what extent is the purpose of my life something that I create from whole cloth, or that's one way of looking at it, is that I don't have any particular purpose, I just have potential. And it is entirely, I'm starting from zero, and I have tools, and I have to, it's my complete responsibility to create a vision and then make the vision real.
Okay, and that's one lens.
That's one lens. And then the other lens to that is more the lens of destiny, where
you
it's
discover the purpose.
Yes, where I'm like,
and you go, Eureka!
Yeah, I think, well, my job is to figure out what kind of seed am I? Am I an oak? Am I an acorn? Am I a grass seed? Am I a mushroom spore? Am I a thing? But I'm thinking of myself as like a kind of, instead of just like a blank potentiality generator, or blank repository of potentiality. I'm like a specific potentiality where, you have something within you that if you take your life seriously and you live your life earnestly, with courage, with honesty, and with persistence, you get to wait and see what happens and what blooms, and you go, oh, the thing that bloomed was the thing that was in me. I'm glad that I lived my life because now this thing bloomed. Or is it to what extent do you get to choose what plant you grow into? Is it that any person can grow into anything, or is it that more just you either grow or you don't? And I'm not sure about that, because when I think about things from this purely abstract humanistic perspective, I lean more towards we have a blank page, we're the author, whatever you write, that's your life. But then when I look around at nature, I think, well, every other thing in the world comes with a built-in potentiality, and it's more just a question of is or isn't. Like, if you drop a seed on a soil, most likely it's going to get blown away, but maybe it'll take root and it'll create something. But the thing it created, the thing that it grows into, like your future, your purpose, is something that is related to kind of just where you started.
So one of my answers here is you need I'm at zero, I have to create any purpose I subsequently experience.
Yeah.
Is the only way to get objective information about what kind of seed you are. Because the only thing that's going to get you to a full bloom is making a decision about what you're going to make of your life, and then carrying through that idea to fulfillment and getting the experience and all the unexpected twists and turns along the way. And then not only do you get the chosen, very specific, directionized experience that you decided and created yourself out of the infinite probability of paths you could have taken, not only do you get that, you also get more objective information about what your nature is and what your purpose is.
It's a process of discovery, experimentation, of trying to pick something to go towards, to see what resistance you encounter that would steer you into a more refined idea of what it is that you're suited for, kind of.
Like, I'm thinking of Ade and I, and we met, and then we were both in the hippie part of our lives.
Yeah.
And we devoted a lot of time away from music and learning under adults and elders, and deciding who our gurus individually were going to be, and learning how to individuate and do an inventory on our lives and go back through our entire lives in the shamanistic way and heal all the broken parts so that we could have a firmer foundation to then build a career on afterwards. So we did that, and then we learned to be a counselor under Sonia Sophia, and then we started our own therapy community circle of teaching people how to give themselves counseling in the weekly circle that we were hosting. So come and share what you want to work on in your life with other people, and spend some time with all of us in real time working on that issue on your own terms, but with other people who are doing the same thing. Hosting that for a while, and that was the fulfillment of the hippie part of our lives. It reached fulfillment and started its own career path, and then we got all the experience and education of doing that, and then I was the one who broke first and was like, fuck this, I'm done, I don't care enough. It's definitely about heavy metal and music. It's way more relevant. So we learned more about both, and he agreed with me. So both of us learned more about our true nature by doing that. And so now then we started a band with our friends and carried that to full fulfillment of that band, and played a lot of amazing shows, and got a very good following for our level of competence, and had a lot of great experiences. And then that deciding, it was an arbitrary decision. Well, like, we could play with anyone, but we're gonna play with these people, and we're going to like accept the terms that playing with these people requires us to accept. And then that we got that whole experience of playing with the band Soren, and then it showed us more objective reality of, fuck this, it can't be a democracy, that can't be how anything's created, and it can't involve compromise at all.
Bands are not democracies.
That's new.
Yeah, no.
That's new objective information about our own true natures. And so we formed the Creator as the new, more real band. And so both of those prior steps were like, we could have done anything with our lives. We chose to do this thing, and then there's just basic purpose and meaning in one's ability to do that. But then it revealed more of just the seed we already knew we were inside. And so we make a more higher res career path based on that new knowledge of what our destiny is.
That's a good illustration of this, because I feel like you kind of described the way that you went out into the external world to encounter something, to run up against purpose, and then modulate your direction based on how that felt with what was inside. What I was going to say before you went on that, which I think kind of informed what I was about to say, what I was going to say was that I wonder, like, because I think a deficit of purpose is one of like the preeminent crises of present age.
Sure.
And so it's a fairly dramatic way of putting it, but I think it's true. Like just like on a high level, I guess to just restate this question to kind of nail it down, what is purpose something like where if one wants to find purpose, should you look into the world or should you look into yourself first? Like, by the time you get to a point in your life where you're an adult and you are not just going through the program, so for most people that would be like going off to college or something, but honestly it's after that, really, in this times. Like, by the point, let's say that you're 25 and you're having the quarter life crisis that everyone has, where you go through college and you go, well, that was fast. What do I do? Who am I? Do I want to become a hippie bohemian and go live on a commune, or do I want to join a corporation and try to make a big salary, or do I just want to play video games all day? What does my path in life take me from here?
And do you look outside for the answer first, or do you look inside for the answer first?
Do you sit there and you go, what does the world need? Well, I'm thinking, I'll just put this in my own terms, I guess, because it's more concrete this way. What am I really doing? Am I looking at the world going, the world really needs, programmers who are going to use the power of computers and the internet to make something that is good for the world. And so my purpose, my abilities fit with that need, so I'm going to give myself to that and do it. So that's one way of articulating your purpose. Or there's another way, which is like, in what I do, am I instead going, well, deep inside me, what I really love to do is create systems.
Which one of those are you doing? I know which one of those has to be a more real layer of the stack for maximum health.
Well, so I think that I've come around to the idea that I think it's actually the second one. Is that
What's the second one?
The second one is that
Or do you just like building systems?
I think that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I think it's that I just like building stuff. And what I've done is that I've looked inside myself and I go, the only things I'm going to be good at are the things I like doing.
That's right.
So I have to start with something I like doing,
Yes.
and then hope that it's useful. And that I think is a kind of a gamble, because there's no guarantee that the world is going to accept with open arms that which you bring out from yourself. Just like there's no guarantee that if you drop a seed on a dusty part of dry, you know what I'm saying?
See, making sure it's something you're maximally interested in and like doing makes sure that you'll stick with it long enough to make the adjustments that reality requires.
That's the ideal case.
For it to be profitable for both parties.
That's the ideal case.
Like, it takes time to instantiate your project in a positive sum, everyone benefits way that's monetizable into the real world. That takes time and trial and error. So it being relevant and interesting to you is a requirement for it. It's a positively reinforcing thing. Like, if you do it, if it's the thing you like the most, and if it's the thing that's the most relevant to you, then you can spend the most time iterating it and improving it, and so it can be of the most benefit to other people and give you the most money.
Yeah, I wonder, because, you know, I think there's a lot of examples in the world of things that have potential that don't go anywhere. And a lot of times it's because the environment is not ready to accept what those things have. And it's not, I'm thinking about, for instance, a lot of things like in crypto right now. There's a lot of really good ideas about how to create decentralized apps.
And the greater world isn't ready.
It's not ready for them
To grab that
exactly.
and use it.
And so what right now, people who have those ideas are making them, and they're going to be disappointed because they won't take. But later on, someone else is going to do the same thing, or maybe those people, if they stick with it, but maybe someone else is going to do the same thing, and then suddenly it's going to branch out, and it's going to take, because the world's ready for it. And I think that it's a scattershot way of doing things. And like, if you think about each person as a seed who might not sprout at all, but if they gather up the courage to do so and they try, they still might fail. And I think that you have to, at least I try to think of this in a way that I don't let myself use an expectation of whether for something will succeed as part of my motivational paradigm, or whether I should do it.
Totally.
What I'm trying to do is go, you know, if I really do believe in myself, and I really do believe in that there is something inside me that I want to do, I have to be willing to do it, and with the acceptance that it might fail despite the fact that I choose to do it.
Yeah, that's the acid test, or if it's worth doing. Is it so important for me to do that it is a means it's an end in and of itself?
Precisely.
Independent of results?
Precisely. And to me, that attitude...
Because if it's not that important, then I can't do a good enough job on it.
Like, you have to be willing to gamble. If you demand certainty that your gamble will pay off, then it's not a gamble. And I think that's nature is gambling. Every single tree that drops a million seeds every single one of those little seeds is a gamble, that it's a long shot, that it's going to turn into something life-giving in the future that's going to perpetuate things. And I feel like that's what a human life is like, is that you have to, there's like the first battle, which is choosing to do anything at all. And then the second one is continuing when you realize that even though you have chosen, you still might not get where you're going.
Totally.
But like, that's a hard truth to accept, I think. But it's almost like, I think that coming to that attitude maps to that idea of internal destiny that I've conceptualized. And for some reason, it feels more secure to me, because even though I know that it might fail, I sort of think, well, I just came into this world, and the only thing that I truly have responsibility over is the things that I have the power to do, irrespective of what else happens. And I have the choice to do it or not.
If you want to build more certainty about the objective universe, you have to start with the only thing that you have a direct experience with, just how is your own convictions.
Yeah.
And discovering the things that are an end in and of themselves for you to do. And like, it's iterations on that are gonna get you into greater revelations of truth, is starting with the basic inescapable truth of your existing right now and having an experience. And so that directionizes, like, well, this experience tends towards systems building.
Yeah.
Or this experience tends towards world building in my case. So you're gonna lay out abstract thinking versus concrete thinking.
Yes.
And I'm kind of curious about like what the nature of your abstract thinking is that you are so that you tend towards so automatically.
So it's something I noticed. I was kind of thinking about noticing the way a lot of times the way I talk is I try to generalize things to the nth degree.
Totally.
And you're very aware of that. And it becomes tiresome even for me, which is saying a lot. So I can only imagine how oppressive this is to other people. And because like sometimes I get the feeling where someone will make a point and I'll be like I'll just blow it up to cosmic proportions to the point where it's so not actionable. It's like, that's great. I understand the universe now, but I'm like square one. What am I going to do next? How does this help me? And I think that I've developed, this thing has always been latent within me, but I think it's just, it's really encouraged by the fact that I just like program for hours every day, and that kind of generalization and abstraction is like my bread and butter, to where like every single time I think of a thing, I go, hold on, let's back up. What is this really? Okay, wait, what is that? What is that? What is that? And then I get almost like I try to just like shoot things into the stratosphere first.
Sure.
so that I can see how are things really other things in a more general sense. Everything is the same thing. Everything is this kind of this and I just noticed that there's a kind of there's domains in which that's a good thing, like code, because then you end up with really clean, modular, abstract, reusable code, which is beautiful. And that's
the universality into how you make your specific pieces.
Interoperability, maintainability. There's all these advantages to be gained through generalization and abstraction. But I think that I'm trying to reconcile and not let my mode of conversation, thought, and action be dictated by this pattern that I just train myself to do. I've been thinking about like how habitually you can get into a mode where you're not talking about where you're talking about more like just you're talking about defining things. You're talking about presenting ideas of what you think, how you see things, the way things are, as like this, at worst, it's like this idle academic exercise of going, what is the soul? Or like, what is this? Or, and it's like these, you just get this image of like someone like sitting on like a ancient Greek thing going like, and then everyone's going like, good job, you're smart, good job. But then there's the other side of that thing, and again, as an aside, I've also realized an aspect of this abstraction thing is this tendency to create dialectics on every single fucking thing I explain, which is another thing which I'm trying to not do, but I'm going to do it. So on the other side of that is the kind of person who's like, this is like talking, like proposing or suggesting or basically not communicating for the sake of communicating for the sake of using it as a means to an end to accomplish something real.
Yeah, just getting the job done.
Just getting the job done. Exactly. Going, what do you want to do right now? What about this idea? Do you want to do this? How are we going to do this? Just making, like, putting forth suggestions that will act like, well, and to make this concrete. Well, the idea about long-term things about the pod is like one good example about that. But like in real terms, like suggesting like talking about like if we had a guest on this pod, what would that look like? What are the considerations? And the idea being that the purpose of talking about this is to make that happen, not to examine and enjoy the process of figuring it out.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that that's just like really cool to think in those ways of like, just like being like practically oriented, where when you bump into something that you want to know how to do, you use your understanding and generalization and abstraction to inform your model of the situation so that you can decide what to do. But you just don't sit there and spin up models out of thin air about every which thing. And it's almost like the conversational equivalent of like this observational comedy, where like you met some old school comedians are like, so what about those crazy little styrofoam cups that you get? Those things, like, haha, what are those? Just these little laughing at weird little things, and everyone's like, yeah, huh. Okay. It doesn't have much import to, it doesn't make you excited. It doesn't make you feel like you're getting anywhere.
And I like adding in our idea of long-term questions in the pod, because that's taking our podcast and going, okay, what do we do with it? How do we make it, okay, it's going to be long-term and like be profitable and like helpful. Okay, how do we make it helpful?
Exactly.
Okay, we can engage in long-term questions that would really be fucking helpful to have answered, but that can't be answered except by repeatedly returning to them over the course of a year. And how's your experience been going with trying to frame your thoughts in a more actionable way?
Well, I have a lot of good experience with this in doing my work with Ryan specifically, because we have this constant ongoing chat where we're constantly suggesting ideas, going, what do you think about this? Should we do this? I think we should do this, and here's why. And then a lot of times we do it. And that's so gratifying to me, to be able to talk about problem-solving, abstract model making in the context of something's going to come out of this.
Yeah.
Because then I can get excited when I come up with an idea, because it's not just like, oh, I'm right, great. It's like I get the thing that is enabled by unlocking this insight.
Yeah.
So that in that domain, in my work, I get a lot of really good engagement with this concrete way of doing things.
But see, there's another like little fun mix of like, this medium we've created for ourselves is a way to concretize our most abstract thoughts we get throughout the week. Like now our abstract thoughts can get even more galaxy brained and more dissociated because we have a medium to directly turn them into value.
That's true.
In terms of runtime on the podcast.
That's true, in a sense. Because now every time I think of something interesting throughout the week, my impulse is to go, oh, quick, text that. Because, I know I'm going to be able to unpack that later. That's really cool, but it still needs to ultimately be linked to the base layer of, like, meat space.
And that's what the bigger questions, again, relating it to our own thing.
Good.
That's what the base questions help do for our far-reaching abstract thoughts that we toss into the thread throughout the week. Now we have, with getting clearer on bigger issues that we want to solve over time, we have more of a standard against which the random abstract strains of thought can be valued against.
100%, yeah.
Like if we know the bigger question of that year that one or that you or I are interested in answering, then we have a new hot cold sense to cross-reference any given prompt against.
Yeah.
Like, how do we decide between one prompt and another?
Right. Yeah, well, but it is that hot cold sense, and I think that, well, you are certainly. I'm a bit playing catch up with this, but in terms of applying that hot cold sense to going, is that worth discussing? Is that worth? Does that fit with the larger paradigm? Because there's a lot of things that don't. Yeah. I just feel like, there's such a, you know what Gen Z is? They're the monetization generation. They are so interested in monetizing things, and so am I. I think that monetizing things is the key to being able to have everyone be able to do things, more people be able to do things that they want.
Yeah.
And
To just get more and more accurate coinage for all the different things we want to do.
And I think that if there was some actionable way that you could transform and you could shape the crowdfunding potential of the internet into something where a reasonable amount of money went to a large amount of people instead of an unreasonable amount of money going to very few people, then you would have a kind of world that was more, the virtual world could be made closer to the physical world where like an average person can have a job and make a life. It's totally possible. You can do something useful, you can get paid, and you can buy the things you need. The virtual world right now is not like that at all. It's that vast majority of people aren't able to get above a threshold where they can have a livable amount of money that's enough money every month where they can focus on what it is they want to do. And obviously not everyone's a creative, and not everybody wants to be, because it's a lot of work. But for the people who want to, I saw some statistic like this, like some survey was like, I'm not sure if this was USA or globally. I think it was actually globally, or at least in like USA and Europe or something. But like they took a survey about like what is like the most popular aspirational career path for kids in school.
Yeah.
And like in prior generations, it was always like 15% of kids want to be an astronaut. Are 15% of kids going to be an astronaut? Well, no. But the fact that they want to reveals something about what that generation idealizes as like a good, interesting thing or something. And
now some high percentage just wants to be a
YouTuber.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like 25% of kids globally, their dream is to be a YouTuber. And so I think you have to take that seriously and go, well, that indicates that there is
then we need a better YouTube.
We really fucking do. And we need a kind of
that delegates the money more accurately.
Yes, and more efficiently, in a way that it isn't just like it's this thing where everyone's trying to get to the top, baby, so I can get that $1 million thing. You don't need $1 million to be a YouTuber. You need a few thousand a month.
But it's like, it's already gotten a lot better than it was like 3 years ago. Like super chats are a thing in YouTube
where you
now.
can put donations in the chat.
If you pay money, then your comment will go to the top and be highlighted as this person paid money to have you read this. And so there's new ways even within the YouTube monolith of viewers giving their money directly to the person that they're watching. And then there's even just like Patreon, like I want to give it directly to them. Okay, they've set up this service over here that will take like a negligible percent of my donation. So all my money that I want to go to them is going to them. But want to know about Tenet, though?
Oh,
Did you watch it again?
no.
Damn it.
I just
I was hoping you did.
had a mind blown moment where I realized that the word tenet is a palindrome.
And the movie's a palindrome.
I know, and that's why it blew my mind. It's like one of those things that I realized, like, you clever bastard. It's built into the title itself.
It's clever,
It's clever.
but it's not good.
What? What do you mean? Clever is
It's not
good.
a good movie. No, clever gets you nowhere.
Wait, I thought you thought Tenet was a great movie,
Yeah, I've watched it like 5 or 6 times.
and you're saying it's not good?
It's one of his worst films, for sure.
Okay, are you in relative terms or are you saying it's not good? It's not good compared to his other ones, or it's not good, period? Because why would you watch it for 5 times if you didn't think it was good?
Sure, it's good, objectively enough to watch 5 or 6 times. Relative to his capabilities, relative to my personal standards of art, relative to his other movies that he's made, there's a pattern of decay happening. And I also think it's a delegation of strengths that is happening with that personality in particular, because his movies tend to be of a higher quality when his brother writes the screenplay. And when he writes the screenplay himself, it really suffers, because he just really sucks at it. And
So he's a better director.
and a better engineer. Like, he engineered Tenet. So yeah, it's a good movie because it's a well-engineered object that's never been made before. And the way its pieces interact with each other is really novel and amazing piece of engineering. But it's not a piece of human art transmitting real values. And the plot is not engineered well. And the plot meaning the way these values collide with each other and rise up to a climax of the synthesis of all the values being presented. The plot sucks. And the characters that are individual avatars of different value statements of the world are not clearly made in the movie.
So the movie exists as like a gee whiz gizmo to
Yes.
illustrate a particular.
It's clever, but it's not meaningful.
Clever is something.
The way
Right.
the way it's meaningful is not understood consciously by the guy who made it. He should have made it sketch-wise and then zeroed in on what the value, the archetypal value of the palindrome was articulating, and then isolated that and went, okay, there's future attractors. And what does that mean for how we should live as people? And how am I going to reflect that in the changing behavioral reactions of the protagonist?
I think I believe in the future attractors now. I think that just clued me into something. This future attractor thing is it's a very cool way of living, because it kind of frees up your will to do things without constantly evaluating why you're doing them. It kind of allows you to have a certain kind of confidence or faith even.
So in the movie, the fact of the future attractor acting on all the past events in its terms, it's creating all those past events so that it, as a future attractor, can exist.
Yeah.
Its existence is sponsoring the
Yes.
protagonist being the fool of the tarot wheel through the course of the movie. He has to learn by doing. He does not understand his part in the puzzle. he has to act it out and be a fool and literally fight himself in the free port because he's a fucking idiot and doesn't know, symbolically, doesn't understand that he's getting in his own way. But the future attractor sponsors his ability to just go, I'm just going to react honestly to the best of my ability right here with the stimuli that's in front of me. I'm going to give it everything I have with the choices I have and the information I have in front of me. And because there's a good and objectively good result settled and done in its dimension, I can take it for granted that that's where I'm going and just like shoot from the hip in this moment.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how, like, from the perspective of people who were into Bitcoin back in like 2010, the rise of this world we're living in now, where everyone's buying every which coin, was like a future attractor, in a sense that those people who believed in that the original people who believed in decentralized technology, were doing it because before there was any indication that you could make any money on it at all. Just their interest in it was the thing that set them up to be wildly rich in the future when everything came to pass and they got swept along with this thing.
Yeah.
And you can't fake that. And we don't know what the next thing is that's going to sweep certain people forward. But in order to, there's no way to predict that. If you could predict that, then it would be short-circuited, because then people wouldn't actually put in the work to work on something. They'd just be getting in for a cheap buck.
See, I don't know. Like, I think Jeff Bezos predicted the way it was going to be and then concretized it. And in a way, he decided the way things were going to be based on the way he wanted things to be.
I don't think even Jeff Bezos could possibly know. I don't think he knew Amazon was going to be what it was when he started. I think he was determined to create a website that sold books, but I think that and him doing that and acting on it set him up to be king of Amazon for what it is now. But I think that just the fact that he decided to do it anyways, in the pursuit of what was probably in his wildest imagination a much less reward than what he has now, resulted in him getting what he has now. So it was kind of like, I don't know, you have to ask him.
So one tool I use is in the question I'm about to ask right now. If you became certain on this issue of your purpose and this interrelating of destiny and purpose and future attractors with your free will now in the present to mold your destiny based on your own desire and your own inspiration. If you definitively answered that question, what would be different in your life and how you navigated the world? Why do you think that'd be good to be certain about that? Would you do things better or something?
Yes. I think I would do things with much less trepidation.
So you have a felt experience of trepidation that is inefficient.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, I spend unnecessary time thinking about possible futures. And I've come to realize that the more you're thinking about the future, the less you're thinking about the present. And that it seems like a kind of, everything you're told, everything you're taught tells you to figure out how the cards are going to lay down, and then set yourself up, or how dominoes are going to I mixed metaphors there. How the dominoes are going to fall, and then set yourself up to touch, to push the right domino to get what you want. And I think that I personally, and probably most people, are fooling themselves in thinking that they can predict how the dominoes fall. And that what you should do instead is just look at yourself and try to get in touch with why, or not even why, but just which domino, which action in the present feels like destiny, feels like you, feels like there's a hot sensor there that's going, touch that one, and don't worry about why, just do it.
What's the purpose of the pod? Because neither of us wanted or planned
Exactly.
to do
This is a perfect example of that.
So it's like now we're here and it's happening and it's awesome,
Yeah.
and I can easily see it making us money
Me too.
pretty soon. But like the kid in school, in both our cases, did not
No.
want this.
No.
Or dream about anything even close to this.
I didn't even think about this when we were starting this. I was just doing it because it was fun. And the only reason I even got to the point where I'm thinking now, like, yeah, this could totally work, is because we put in all the work because it was fun, and I was able to do it because I wasn't anticipating any reward for it. I just wanted to, and then suddenly you find yourself in a position where you go, oh, it's cool that I acted on that thing that I wanted to do, because now I'm in a situation where, like, I actually have like the tools and experience stuff to do it. So I guess just de-emphasizing planning and channeling that more into acting.
Well, what kind of like plan of our own journeys is this making?
I think for me it's opening up the possibility that I could kind of scale up my expression of ideas and stuff to much more people. Whereas it's something I never considered before. It's something I never wanted or thought of or anything like that. Like I never imagined that being a part of public discourse was something I even wanted. But now I'm sort of thinking like, actually that'd be kind of cool in a way to like have a platform to be able to like make connections with people.
It's like teaching me how to think.
Yeah.
That's one thing that's happening.
Yeah.
How to think, how to ask questions, how to see where my own frontier of certainty becoming uncertainty is.
It's teaching me how to be less careful.
Let go of some of the trepidation.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of just it's teaching me how to speak more honestly about things, because I have a confidence that I know that I'll have a space in order to tie up and reintegrate what it is I put forth.
And it's like a higher bandwidth of thought.
Yeah.
So now you can handle higher voltage thoughts.
Yeah, higher voltage thoughts. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Like,
Yeah.
if your bandwidth of thought is restricted to only like casual friends that you don't have a high amount of trust in, then the only kinds of thoughts you're even allowed to think in your own head are very low voltage, safe, low res thoughts. Because what's the concretized point of thinking anything bigger than that? No one's gonna hear it.
Yeah.
You don't have a way to say that to anyone.
Yeah.
You don't have the time in your day to be listened to long enough to get the whole thought out.
Right.
So why would you even catch that thought out of all the infinite thoughts you have in a day?
Yeah. I think there's also something kind of cool about being part of the world in a more integrated way.
Sure.
Like being more of a participant and less of an observer. Because I think my baseline state is to always, it goes along with the generalization thing, but my baseline state is to always try to get distance from systems in order to be able to see them clearly. Because my general bias is that the more involved you are with something, the less objective you can be. And I think there's some truth to that, but also there's this little part of me that's like, well, maybe the highest virtue isn't objectivity. Maybe there's other virtues in the world that are like a kind of thing that's more like playing music or something like that. And that Alan Watts has some really good take on this, where he kind of conceives of like the activity of the universe as he puts it, everything just going boop de boop de boop de boop de boop. Where like you have, I think those are his exact words, where you just have, what is an animal doing? Really, it's just going boop de boop de boop. Like it's just like a person. It goes, oh, I'm a drummer. Okay, I'm gonna drum.
It's like Pokemon. Mm-hmm. All they do is say their own names.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So like as a person, you have. I personally want to have a willingness to just let myself be an expression of the moment, of the context, the place, and the time, and all the things we talk about, and just let myself be like a conduit or a channel to synthesize things so that they can become baked into the layers of the world and influence the way things. It's a kind of immortality.
Well, I think
which is kind of cool.
I think the level of objectivity you can achieve has a glass ceiling on it if you don't get your head in the game, get your feet on the ground.
Interesting.
It's the metaphor of a general looking over his field.
Yeah.
And so that's required that he be separate from the combat.
Yeah.
But it's also would be better if he got in there into the heat of the moment so he could feel the battle around him and then step out again and have more informed, objective, bird's eye view decisions to make. Because he's in there. He's been in there. He's had the experience of it. And so being able to be a participant in the world is going to raise the glass ceiling on how meta and universal your programming can get, because it's informed by an embodied experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautifully put. And that last night I was watching this documentary about Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And the documentary was set.
Every male podcast has mentioned this documentary.
Really?
Repeatedly.
This is the first time I've heard of it.
For the last year.
Shit.
It's been a regular point.
Good. Okay. Well, that makes me think of this idea that like if you have an idea that you think that you think is new, that no one's ever said before, it's either a really good idea or a really bad idea.
But you were seeing that documentary.
Yeah. So, anyways, I was watching. So, my point in saying that is that it's cool. I'm glad that other people are talking about this because it's great. It's worth talking about. So, there's this documentary where one of the things that stood out to me most prominently was that it was like the format of it was kind of cutting in between, among other things. It was cutting in between Michael Jordan, like sitting in his like really nice, presumably like his really nice house. He's sitting in his nice chair. He's got like a little glass of like scotch or whatever. He's got a cigar, and he's like sitting there. He's got his cool earring and everything. He's like a little bit older than most images of him. You know what I mean? And they're asking him questions, and he has like this really. He's like that general looking over the battlefield. He's got this really high level view where he's in that memoirs stage of his life where he's reflecting and he's going, and he's just talking about it in
like, oh, that's why I did that.
Exactly. And he's this very candid kind of like post facto kind of like earnest open kind of spoken from the position of a man who has a lot of respect and a lot of dignity and a lot of just license to just say. And so he earned that. He earned that perspective, and he earned this station to speak from that perspective. But what was cool about it is that it kept cutting. He would say something, and then it would cut to like a scene of like some old footage from the 90s where he's like going like, and he's like dunking, and like he's going like this, and his teammates are like, yeah, bro, and, it's like this kind of like fast, kind of like torrid, sweaty, just like he's totally in a different state where he's not like this put together kind of guy. He's like this in the thick of it. He's like this much younger man. He's got his shiny fucking chrome dome. He's like just like he's got his like Air Jordans or whatever, and it's like it's a time and a place, and you start, and it makes you think like, oh man, the 90s were so cool, and like it just like this whole like, and I don't know, it's just like and it brought to mind this word like glory. Like what glory, like what is the idea of glory? And glory is almost something that becomes better with time. That when you're viewing it from the perspective of you being in the future and it being in the past, when you look back on something, it has like this kind of like faded but really kind of durable, timeless nostalgia to it. And those two things go together, that when you get into the flow and you let yourself get sucked into this kind of really fast moving, unpredictable, chaotic, high energy thing, it synthesizes this kind of space in the future for you to tie that together to who you are in that moment, because he's informed by his past a lot, and I was just thinking about that, like it's cool that when he was doing that, I'm sure he wasn't thinking about many years in the future when he was going to be sitting in a chair. He wasn't thinking about it at all. He was just in the present moment, and that's what a lot of the documentary was focusing on, was that when someone, for example, would ask him, some reporter was following him, and he was like walking into a game, and they're like, and by the way, I'm not a fan of basketball. I'm not a fan of sports really at all. This is independent of the...
That's what everyone says about the documentary.
God damn it!
In every male podcast when they bring up this.
Okay, well, I'm speaking, this is my own personal truth.
Specifically talked about by people who don't like basketball.
God damn it. Okay, well, that's just a testament to how compelling it is, because it transcends, it's just not some kind of like sports jerk-off thing where I'm like, I wish the basketball was so cool. No, it's not that at all. It's that specifically, there was a scene where he's walking in, the reporter's following him, going like, and Michael Jordan, he's got headphones, and he's kind of like jiving, he's bouncing, he's like walking in there, he's getting himself pumped for the game, he's like kind of moving in this really dancing sort of way, and he's got like sunglasses, and people are asking him like, so, what would you say? Do you think that, how do you feel about the game? Do you feel like you're going to win tonight? And he's like, yes, no, maybe. And they ask him again, he goes, yes, no, maybe. And it's like, there's so much wisdom in that, because he's like, why would I think about that? It hasn't happened yet. So he's kind of like resisting the future's colonization of his present state of mind and keeping himself focused, and that's why he can do crazy things like, swish it from, So I was like, that's
part of his strength on the court that very day, is his comfortability with the probability of no and maybe.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to come down hard on yes. That's not gonna affect his image of himself.
Yeah, because what are you, if he were to say yes, what are you really saying when you say yes? Are you saying, all you're doing is betraying your own need to feel certain about something in order to get yourself to do it?
Yeah.
And it's much stronger to resist that demand of other people to want you to play their game, which is betting on the future. Because that's what culture at large is trying to get people to do, is take a stand, commit to something, so that way if it happens we can know you were right, or if it doesn't we can know you were wrong. it's just much stronger to not do that at all. And I guess this sort of connects to that idea of abstract versus concrete, because abstractions are really future oriented. They're really easy to let your consciousness slide out into these ideas, and you know, you have a finite amount of focus, and you can't. So I don't know. It's cool. Michael Jordan's great. I'm glad he hasn't had a scandal yet. He's so cool that there is like someone who people can just be like, oh yeah, Michael Jordan. Yeah, that guy hasn't, you know, it hasn't gone the, you know, he didn't pull a Bill Cosby or anything. So
there's a those two go together. His pristine portrayal in the world and the height of his achievement.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been able to achieve that level of competence with a shoddy moral code that was creating scandals to be discovered later. Because that shit takes up too much space in your mind to play a good game if you're doing shit that you're not okay with. So like, those two do go together. Well-built life makes a well-built basketball game. I'm having the experience, and maybe this is the last thing. I'm having the experience with video game design where I'm like coming into an acceptance of the part of my life that like really wants to direct video games and create them. Just based on like dissatisfaction and like realizing that it's never gonna get done. And so like accepting that these abstract thoughts and inclinations about them aren't going away. And so I'm allowing them to frame themselves in my mind in more and more and more concrete terms. And so as they get more license from me, like, okay, fine. Like, at some point I'm probably going to be lead director of a team of programmers making a game. Fine. I don't know when, I don't know how, that doesn't matter. Like, it's going to happen.
That's really cool. That's an aspiration, huh?
So now that that assumption is granted, now that train of thought that keeps coming back over and over again but never has a foothold because I don't have that first underlying assumption that it's gonna amount to anything. Now that assumption is there. So then that rhythm of thought came back again and it leaped ahead the other day, like 5 or 6 steps of very clear game mechanics that I want to integrate together. And like it became way more concrete now that it like had permission from me to be concretized.
So do you want to elaborate on what you suggested the other day about what we were talking about video games, that it kind of like have like create like a bridge to the world, or have like a more real world import?
I was riffing off like being part of a combat team, and like in like a Call of Duty game or in a Halo game, like it's exciting because of purpose. And the Halo campaign is exciting to play through, like because you're saving the world.
Sure.
And like it's exciting to play these combat games like Call of Duty because you're part of a team achieving a goal and working towards a mission, and working together to like achieve the thing and get the job done,
or just survive the zombie horde.
And that, so I had this intuition of, if the purpose can get more and more and more and more meaningful, eventually that's gonna concretize into coinage, into like actual value that's being made if your team achieves the goal. And so like that went to like virtual frontiers that we discover that have resources in there and you have to go out there with your team of gamers to go like get that value, like gold miners. And so maybe that's like a way to gamify the production of bitcoins. It's like a way, it could be like a way of visually representing the action that's required of you. And so like it becomes a game. And so like every hour of playing the game, like if you're good at it, will produce one more of the coins.
Okay, so yesterday, this is going to connect, I promise.
Oh god. Okay.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating. Okay, so yesterday I was thinking about how cool it would be to have a contact form on satellite that was spam resistant, to where you could use your profile as a point of contact to where people could reach out to you.
And you would never get spam.
And you wouldn't have to get spam, and you wouldn't have to reveal your email address publicly, which would get you spam. So the problem, most spam comes from bots. If a person has to be a human, that's going to rate limit the amount of messages you get, and so the whole thing will work. So in order to rate limit the messages and prevent bots from doing it, you have to have captchas. And captchas, are basically those things where you have to like choose the images to prove you're not a robot. Exactly. So there's a company called HCAPTCHA that provides a service where you give the user a captcha, and then when they solve it, they get to do the action that is behind the captcha. So
cool.
That's fine. So the way this company, what the company does is that they provide the captcha service for free. And then every time a user solves a captcha, the captcha service gets some data about how that human solved the captcha.
Okay.
That data set is now valuable. And what that company does is they sell that data set of humans solving captchas to other companies who are creating AI, which is trained on that data set.
Okay.
And then they give some of that money back to the company that was using those captchas. So literally, instead of having to pay to have a service for users to have captchas for this contact form, I will get paid by creating a service that requires captchas, because ultimately the money is coming from companies who are paying that company for data. So that is an example of how there is this virtual resource called humanness that is being created by people who are mining it, sort of, and then it's providing like this economic model that is funding the whole thing, because the users themselves you're like creating a monetarily valuable abstraction of human activity. And that's a particular business use case, whatever.
Yep.
But it is in general terms, it is exactly the same thing as this. You could gamify that in other more fun ways, way more fun than clicking on pictures of a fire hydrant or something, or a car or a boat. You could have something where like maybe there is some application for like an AI that could be used to create hyper-realistic AI opponents in a video game. So what a person does is that they join a team, and then the teams compete against each other in some sort of like Halo or whatever.
And then they sell the metadata of how the players...
Exactly.
And that informs the AI company that's trying to make better enemy AI.
Or like something like that, or like an AI, it figures out what does a good team leader look like. So then that way, if you're a good team leader, you could get a payout for winning games because you helped create a good definition of what a leader was, because by definition, a good leader is who wins. Yeah. So I think there's totally applications for that, where there could be really fun ways of letting people do something that only humans could do and help, and I don't know. Maybe there's a limit to it because then eventually the AI is going to be so good you won't need the people anymore. But for a brief interval,
Well,
it could be a thing.
That'll put us in a new place.
Exactly.
With new opportunities.
Exactly. Right. Precisely. So, but I'm just saying, what you're saying, I think, is going to happen one way or the other. Pretty fun to think about that.
Okay.
All right, let's do it.
All right.